I don't know about you, but sometimes I really do get tired of praying and waiting on God. Because let's be honest, waiting on God is one thing, but waiting on God when you've been waiting for a longer period of time, especially longer than you anticipated, that's a whole nother story. And if we're honest, that is where the real challenge is. Because I think we do a lot of times come into this waiting season with an expected deadline. There's an expectancy that God's going to come through, that the door is going to be open, opportunities are going to fall into place, healing is going to happen. And so we come in with all this faith and encouragement, and we're excited that God's going to move. Yes. And don't get me wrong, don't hear what I'm not saying. I really do believe that we should have faith in all seasons and in all things, especially when we're praying. Why pray if you're not going to have faith? But we also can't deny the fact that even though we may start off having a lot of faith and a lot of zeal that things are going to happen, when things don't happen on our timeline, the ones that we actually don't say out loud, and God doesn't answer our prayers when we hope that He was going to answer them, then this is where a lot of things start to shift. And now that faith and that zeal that we have is starting to look a little bit different. Suddenly, we might be consumed with a lot of doubt or a lot of fear or anxieties and questions like, okay, did I miss God? Is this actually His will? Is this even a no? Like, what is going on right now? And I do believe those extended waiting periods of times can have that effect on us. They are moments where we start to bring out a lot of questions, and it does get a little bit frustrating and even discouraging, especially when you start to see other people receive the very thing that you've been praying for. And it's almost like, am I not praying enough? Am I not fasting enough? Am I not seeking God enough? What in the world is really going on? In fact, on top of that, sometimes it almost seems like you're taking 5 steps forward and then 10 steps back. And then things are starting to look a little bit more chaotic. And you're wondering, like, can things get any more worse and confusing than they actually are right now? That waiting season, oh, that waiting season, especially when it's long waiting season, can be fun. Yeah, and it can definitely bring about a lot of lessons as well. And so I want to share some of the lessons that I have learned, and I hope that they actually do encourage you in these seasons because I get it. Sometimes you can ask yourself things like, well, how do I stay faithful in those seasons that are a little bit longer than I anticipated them to be? Or how do I deal with those anxieties when I'm praying for this thing and I was hoping that God would show up within at least a couple of months, but now I've been waiting on God for like 3 years and I still haven't seen that come into fruition. How on earth do I keep going in this and how do I not lose hope? It's one thing that I've really learned that I hope to encourage you with is the fact that God's timing and ways of doing things is completely different than ours, oftentimes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because a lot of times the things that we do see in the natural is really only a snippet of everything that is actually happening in the background that we may not see. Sometimes there are doors that have to be closed before the doors that we are praying for can be opened. Sometimes certain things have to fall in place and other people have to meet certain people before that opportunity comes along for us. And so a lot of times we think things are not happening, but what's really happening is the chaos that we're seeing in the thick of it is actually God working all of that out, even though it doesn't look that way at that very moment. And again, it's easier said than done. And especially when you're outside of it and you finally made it out of that waiting season, is when you can look back and start to see, oh, okay, this had to fall into place before this could happen and etc. But at the same time, sometimes we also don't always see those little pieces that had to fit together before the big picture came together. Sometimes we only do see the end. But whatever it is that we are exposed to, it's just being reminded that God really does work things out for our good. We can forget this at times, and it's something that you hear and you read about. But when you're in that moment, it's a completely different ballgame because now you're going to have to put that into play. Everything that you have learned about and memorized and encouraged other people about, because I know you've been encouraging people with that scripture too. Now you got to put that into play in your own life and you have to apply those truths in your own life. And when we do remember how good God has been to us in the past, I think it also helps us to be reminded that if he helped us in the past in some shape, way, and form, and he has answered our prayers, then what's stopping him from answering our prayers in this season of our lives? Even if it does look a little bit different. And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is you have to wait a little bit longer. Sometimes the answer is you're just not ready. Sometimes the answer is I'm going to be silent in this moment because I need to work out some things in your own heart. And that brings me to the second lesson that I have learned is the fact that a lot of times God is using these waiting seasons to also reveal another aspect of his character to us, while also showing us what's really going on in our own hearts in this season. We forget often that a lot of the Christian walk is also us still getting to know who God is. And so, even though we've been exposed to a lot of his character and we're grounded and we can say that, yes, God is good and God is faithful, etc., there's a lot to him that we still don't know or may have been exposed to personally. And I do believe in those waiting seasons, he really does reveal different areas of his character to us. And that's needed because that is also us maturing in our knowledge of him. I think of the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. You guys remember that, right? And just the fact that Jesus didn't show up until after Lazarus had died. In the natural, that's almost like, well, then why show up anyways? You know? And it's like, I thought you were supposed to be here to heal Lazarus. That was the goal. And this is what we were praying for because we know you to be a healer. So you can just imagine the disappointment with these sisters when they're praying for something to happen. They're praying for their brother to be healed. And then Jesus doesn't come. He doesn't show up when they wanted him to show up. But then he finally shows up, but he shows up at a time where in their minds it was too late. But for him, seeing the bigger picture of things, he was going to reveal himself as the resurrection and life, since Mary and Martha already knew him as the healer. When I think about that story and how it applies to my own life in this current day, is the fact that there are things that God can reveal to me about his character as I wait for certain things. And trust me, I am in my own waiting season right now, which of course, in future videos, I will share a little bit more about. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that content. There are definitely things that I'm waiting for and I've been praying for a very long period of time and I've yet to see happen. But again, this is just helping me to learn to be a little bit more patient as I wait for him and seeing him in a whole different light than I have been used to over the years of my salvation. Because sometimes the questions that we start to ask ourselves are actually telling of how much anxiety we have yet to really deal with, or how much fear is starting to pop up in our minds and in our hearts again, or even doubt. I know for me for a fact that when period of time has gone for so much longer than I anticipated and I'm really in desperate need of something happening or a door being opened or something falling into place. Sometimes, if I'm not guarding my heart, I fall back into patterns of fear. There even comes about sometimes a temptation to just go out there and make things happen on your own. Trying to do things on your own and taking matters into your own hands doesn't really work out the way that you want it to. And so, why try to make things happen at a faster rate when it could happen at a slower rate, but happen and fall into place the right way and in God's way and in God's will and his blessing and security? Because there's so much more safety in God's will than there is out there in trying to do things on your own. And so that is definitely something that I have learned as well. So maybe there's things that are happening in your hearts that maybe God is trying to show you. Maybe you're trying to place your trust and hope in other areas and not necessarily in Him. Maybe you don't have as much faith as you thought you did in this area. That doesn't make you a bad Christian woman or a non believer. It just means that this is something that now you have to deal with and you have to bring back to the feet of Jesus. So, if you find yourself in a waiting season, especially one that has gone on longer than you anticipated, I really do want to encourage you that God really hasn't forgotten about you. Again, when we look back at the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, before Jesus even went to meet up with Mary and Martha, he did mention that Lazarus had died, and he mentioned this to his disciple. He was very much aware, and he was letting us know as readers that he was aware. And so God is aware of our waiting seasons and the things that we are in need of and the breakthroughs that we do need. It's not that he has forgotten us. It's just that it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened the way that we anticipated to, or it hasn't happened at the timeline in which we were hoping for it to. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a no. It doesn't necessarily mean that the wait's going to be another 15 years. It just means we have to keep on holding on to what we know about God and trusting in Him throughout this entire season and believing that when it is time, He will come through in the way that He sees fit and trusting in that. And I really do hope you remember that sometimes it's these waiting seasons in which the most growth happens in our faith. So I hope you stay encouraged. And until next time, finish this race.